month. That's outrageous, ladies and gentlemen. And we've come to a point in our country's history where we must address it. You know, for the first time in American history, we now have more government union members in America than we have private sector union members. That's a dangerous wind blowing for our country. I mean, all we have to think about is France and Greece and, you know, these other countries where union officials step up and they call a general strike and the whole country shuts down or a whole city shuts down. The buses, the garbage collection, the police force, the firefighters. And I know that sounds strident, but ladies and gentlemen, we had that here in America in the 1970s. Matter of fact, a union official from the American Federation of State, County, Municipal Employees in Maryland, when the firefighters were out on strike there, said, "Let the city burn. Let the city burn." Anderson, Indiana, firefighters surrounded a burning building block, wouldn't let volunteers get there because of it was a labor dispute. Monopoly union power in the public sector, it does not work. I mean, I will tell you publicly that I have a position that would shock people, and gasps of hot air would come from, you know, all quarters of the country. But I believe that the idea of recognizing unions at all in the private sector is wrong. And in fact, in 1993, the Commonwealth of Virginia, where I live, I had the privilege of being involved in a bill that prohibits the recognition of third parties to interfere with the relationship between elected officials and government officials and our employees. And it's worked well for Virginia. We have a little bit of a budget deficit, but at least we can manage it. In Ohio, the question is seriously, can you do anything to change what's going on in the classroom, or in the school district, or in Columbus, or in your state government, your local government? Can you do anything to change it? Can you change staffing levels? Can you move people around to do other things? Well, all that stuff has to be negotiated. In Minnesota, I believe it is, they negotiate over what textbook to use in the classroom. A union official says, "No, we don't want that textbook, we want this textbook." I don't believe that's an appropriate level of involvement for anyone in that situation. And we ought to leave it up to the teachers and the superintendents and the school officials that we trust, and that that have accountability to us. One of the interesting things about the private sector union, or the public sector union movement, is the accountability factor. It really is. You know, government has grown in Ohio so much that when you look around, you, the taxpayer, are paying people what we estimate to be about 20% more than you make, just in wages and benefits, almost 30% when you add in the benefits. You're paying their salary when you're making 30% less. But yet you're unable to do anything about it right now until we amend this law. What's the fight going to look like? Well, I think the bill can pass through the Senate. I'm a little concerned about the House as I'm gathering intel. I won't tell you that I'm an expert on the Ohio political situation. I've followed it a little bit. But it looks like the bill will be in committee. It'll be voted out of committee on Tuesday. You'll see riots and marches and all kinds of good stuff. I'm not sure. I don't think the Democrats can walk out of the Ohio State Senate and do anything about the quorum. It looks like the numbers are so efficient that they can actually get the job done. In the House, it's a little different story. The bill's already been amended. We're not really sure what's in the bill at this point. It's still kind of a work in progress. What we do know is union officials will say it's the end of the world for workers in the public sector. And ladies and gentlemen, it's not. In the Commonwealth of Virginia, as I mentioned, where we have a relationship between the employees and their employers, i.e. the state or the county or the city or the village, our workers still get paid. They still have insurance. They still have benefits. Can you believe that? Can you believe that? You know, ladies and gentlemen, if we look at it in the broader context, only 6.9% of the private sector of the private sector workers in America are union members anymore. So 93% of the workers in America are getting a paycheck. They're getting benefits. They may not be getting paid what they deserve. I don't get paid what I deserve. You get paid what you deserve? Of course not. You don't. No, of course not. You don't. But you get benefits and you get retirement programs, and the system can work. If we believe the rhetoric that's out there right now in Ohio and Wisconsin, the world would completely stop if we didn't grant this small private group of people the power to negotiate and force workers into this collective for their own, quote, benefit. Well, ladies and gentlemen, I don't know whether we should allow anyone to determine what is beneficial to us and what is not. Some things are obvious, some things are not. But that's the union official's main claim, that right to work somehow destroys unions. Well, first of all, there are unions in the state of Virginia. There are unions in the right-to-work states and the 21 other right-to-work states across the country. In fact, the union density in the right-to-work state of Nevada, I believe, is higher than the union density here in the non-right-to-work state of Ohio. But you know what happens in right-to-work states? Union officials are accountable to rank-and-file workers. When you go to the union hall, all you hear is that we got to go out to the political rally tomorrow. We got to go to the political rally in Columbus. We got to go to the political rally here, there, and everywhere. And all you hear about is elections and politics and all that stuff. And you're a worker in a bargaining union. You sit back and say, well, what about our contract? What about what's happening right here on the work floor? In right-to-work states where workers can vote with their pocketbook and their wallet, a union official has to be careful what they do politically. They have to be careful where they're seen and what they're up to, because workers there can vote with their wallet. And if they don't like what union officials are doing, they would withhold that money. Yes, sir.
And one question, with this Bill 5, it's like they're having trouble in Wisconsin right now. I wonder if it's going to be watered down or not. Are they trying to water it down right now?
Yeah, they are, and I'll get to that in a little bit. What's happening up there on the side. You know, Governor Walker has said that he's going to still allow bargaining for over wages, so they're not wiping out quote bargaining as
Not about here.
Yeah, same thing here.
Yeah.
That's what you're going to allow bargaining here. You're still going to allow bargaining over wages, and the bill has been amended, I think, 3 or 4 or 5 times, and we're still not sure what's in it. It'll probably show up on the floor in the committee on Tuesday, and it'll be much different. There's still negotiations going on. I'm not privy to all that, but the bill that you saw introduced is not the bill that's currently pending in the committee, and there'll be more of that. You know, it's just kind of this clawback. They're going to try to claw back provisions of it and see what will come out. So I don't know what the final bill will be and what bill will pass the Senate. Certainly it won't be the bill that was introduced, and it probably won't be the bill that passes in the House. And when it gets done, we'll see. It's going to be a test of wills. It's going to be a test of wills. Governor Kasich hopefully will have the same fortitude that Governor Walker has in Wisconsin. And I say that not reading the press release today that maybe Walker's already caved in. I don't know. He may have, but I don't know. I'm not saying that he did, but I'm saying I wouldn't be surprised if we wake up in the morning and say, well, we had to drop this, and this, because I don't know if you saw the video of the vote in the House and the people pointing and yelling and screaming, and these are elected officials. If you saw that, that's really concerning. But again, there's the trend that we are in here in the country as we fail to address the growing problem of the forced unionization of government employees. It's the final frontier for them. Growing up, I was a Star Trek kid, and I remember that opening scene, you know, the Enterprise was flying through that black screen and the stars shimmering, and that voice would come on, space, the final frontier. Well, for organized labor, government is the final frontier. The private sector unionization model is really not working very well for them. As a matter of fact, they are now wards of the state. They have decided that their power is so important and so caught up in government policy that they very rarely do stuff in the workplace anymore. They're always going to government asking for the maintenance or the expansion of their privilege. That's a dangerous sign for our government to be involved in picking winners and losers in the marketplace as well. You all know that's a problem. You know it better than most. But here we are, where now because they can't sell a product to American workers anymore, they've got to use government and their compulsory power and government's power to force workers to join them. Now, I won't say that there are workers out there that are not getting great service by their union officials. They absolutely are. And there are committed, conservative, effective union officials working in small bargaining units across America, right here in Ohio, probably right down the street. And those guys that are paying attention, those guys and gals that are paying attention to the interest of the people in the bargaining unit and providing better services for the workers that they claim they represent, they deserve our support. They deserve our praise, but they don't deserve compulsion. They don't deserve compulsion. And I think they understand that. So let's talk a little bit about what's happening right now in the marketplace. We talked about Ohio a little bit. We talked about Wisconsin a little bit. You've seen kind of what's happened up there. We had a fight in Indiana. In fact, last week we had a right-to-work bill. Just a straight right-to-work bill. It doesn't take away anybody's rights to bargain. Doesn't take any of that. It just says you don't have to pay dues or fees to a union. Well, if you're following the headlines of Wisconsin, they left the state because they're taking away their, quote, bargaining rights. Well, in Indiana they walked out because we were saying that a worker had a choice whether or not to pay union dues. Nothing about bargaining rights. So at the end of the day, what this is all about are two things. In Wisconsin and Ohio are the same two issues. You know, in Wisconsin, Governor Walker is trying to pass what is known as a right-to-work law for public employees. He's saying workers in the public sector will have a choice whether or not to pay dues or fees to a union. And if you're a union official, and your power is vested on the power of government forcing these workers to pay you dues, that's fight and talk. The second thing is they want to take away the union's right to use the state payroll system and local payroll systems to collect their dues for them. You may not know this, but the state of Ohio actually takes union dues out of someone's paycheck and forwards it directly to the union. Your tax dollars are collecting money for a private organization. It's called payroll deduction. Now, it's kind of like our tax system. How many of you think the income tax would stand if every payday, and this is my Walter Mitty fantasy, you'd think it'd be past the National Network Law, it's not. I'll take a tangent for a minute. If I was an employer of the world, and I had to pay you all today, I would have cash up here. Actually, Federal Reserve notes. And I would pay you all in Federal Reserve notes, your gross wages. Gross wages, okay? So let's say it's $1,000 gross wages. I would give you the requisite number of bills. I think, what is it, 10 100. I'm a public school graduate, or public school graduate, so it's 10 $100 bills, right? And 20 $50 bills, and how many $20 bills? Anyway, I would pay you in cash. But before you left, I'd have Jim over here, and he would collect your FICA. You'd peel it off your pile. He'd collect your federal tax. You'd peel that off your pile. His wife would collect your Medicare tax. She'd peel off the pile. And his son over here would peel off the state tax. And by the time you walked out, you'd be about 33% lighter than you were when you got your gross wages. How long do you think the American people would let that stand? If you really could see what was coming out and what your tax burden was right there at the moment. Now, union officials understand it the same. Because when they take the $40 out of your paycheck each month, you look at it and you have to pay it to them. If they had to come to the door, knock on your door and say, "Oh, I need you to pay your union dues," you say, "Well, what did you do for me this week?" "Well, we did this and that, and some of that, and some of this, and well, I'm not really sure." But you'd be a lot more sensitive to what that $40 was doing if you had to peel it off your stack and give it to them. So, payroll deduction and compulsory dues. That's the issue in Wisconsin, underneath everything else, because the unions have already conceded, union officials have already conceded they'll make the additional contribution to the health care plan. They've already conceded they'll make the additional contribution to the insurance plan. But the right to work for public employees and the payroll deduction are really where the action is, and that's where the rubber meets the road for them. Same thing is going to happen here in Ohio. The bill initially had payroll deduction. It wiped that out. I'm not sure if that's still in the bill here in Ohio. It may be. We'll see on Tuesday. But yeah, I mean, those are the things that organized labor officials are fighting over, because that is a business survival issue for them. Again, I talked to you about them being a private organization. Any private business that I know of has to sell product, and they have to make sure that revenue exceeds expenses. That's the game. Samuel Gompers said that. He said the best friend that working men have is a businessman who makes a profit. Excuse my manly vernacular there, but those were his words, not mine. But he said that, and he's right. He's right. In the sense of organized labor, it almost seems like now Richard Trumka, the president of the AFL-CIO, is more interested in the progressive movement and the socialization and the globalization of everything we are and who we are, and breaking the sovereignty of this country, that he is willing to forego that and trying to strangle the goose, the golden goose that has made America the most productive country the world's ever known. Not much anymore. But you'd think, if Richard Trumka really cared about the workers that he claims he represents, wouldn't he be more interested in protecting jobs here than in globalization and things? I mean, he was on Russian television, RT, the network RT, if you've heard of that. And he was talking about how the union movement is the bone and the sinew of the progressive movement. That's a long way from Samuel Gompers, who said the workers of America are here to voluntary institutions. And that was brought together through volunteerism, apparently stronger than anything cobbled together through compulsion. Organized labor plays a role in the marketplace, but like you, they should have the same rights that we have as individuals. We get to redress our government. You guys hopefully will redress your government over the next week, and you will have an avenue to do that. Interestingly enough, as you do it voluntarily, as you email and contact your senator telling them to support Senate Bill 5, there'll be another set of private citizens out there that will have power above yours. The government must recognize them, must negotiate with them, must listen to them. And if they don't, they get an unfair labor practice charge against them. And somehow some arbitrator then flies into Ohio and says, well, what's the problem here, people? One side says this, the government says this, we the people say this is what we can do. And the arbitrator says, well, I think I'll do this. And then he flies home and you deal with it. Governor Kasich's talked about the arbitration process. That's part of the bill that would be eliminated, is the binding arbitration provision. Just to show you how this works, I believe it was 1992 in Iowa. Then Governor Terry Branstad, now Governor Terry Branstad, was forced with an arbitration impasse in a contract between state employees in the state of Iowa. Arbitrator flies in, gives the union officials everything they want. Governor Branstad says, I will not agree to this because it forces me to raise taxes on Iowa citizens. The issue goes to the Iowa Supreme Court. What do they say? They say, Governor Branstad, you must raise taxes to satisfy this arbitration award. That's part of the debate we're having here in Ohio. And Governor Kasich and the folks in Columbus, they need some latitude and maneuverability to fill what is an $8 billion deficit? Is that what we're talking about here? That's a lot of money. That's a lot of money. And in order to do that, he has to be flexible, he has to be able to make changes, do things that would probably be heretofore difficult to do under the current system. So I believe that's why he's doing it. Anyone who says it's about busting unions, there may be some involved in this that are interested in that. I'm not personally. As a citizen and a taxpayer, I'm interested in being able to control the government that has power over me. That's what I'm interested in. I think that's what Governor Kasich is interested in. With that, I'd like to answer any questions you have. I know there's a lot of them out there, and we'll get started. I think that's probably the best way for us to continue this dialogue. So, appreciate your indulgence there, but let me ask this young lady right here in the front.
I had someone tell me that they opposed this exercise just because they thought it would have a negative effect on safety services.
Yeah, the question was that the point is that SB 5 would have a negative effect on police and fire, and that's a speculative question. I don't think that's the case. We don't have bargaining in Virginia, but yet house fires get put out and people get rescued and police do their job. That is something, whenever the budget cuts and the other side's in power, what do they cut? They say, well, we're going to have to cut teachers. We have to close the schools. And it's going to be police and firefighters. They ignore 80% of the rest of government where there's inefficiencies going like crazy, and they go right to the things that are, quote, the necessary services of government. That's why we give up our rights for police protection and fire protection. I can't tell you, stand up here and tell you that because a teacher in Ohio is able to get 120 days of paid sick leave in their severance package. I mean, if we take that away, does that hurt education? I don't know. I don't think so. But these are the types of things that have been kind of growing into the system. And we love our police officers and our firefighters, but the thing we don't want to do, and we don't reward them by forcing them into union collectives, making them pay dues as a condition of their employment, and then taking those firefighters, for example, that are paid firefighters, and then would like to volunteer at a small firehouse, and the International Association of Firefighters, AFL-CIO, says if you do that, you can be fined by the union and disciplined by the union for volunteering at another firehouse. I don't think that compulsion helps any system. I mean, I don't believe that elected officials would knowingly and politically, it wouldn't be politically smart to say, hey, we're going to fire all the firefighters. I mean, there may be a reality to that, but ultimately, the one thing that will be restored when government gets back to where it's supposed to be is the firefighting system and the police system. So that's rhetoric, it's powerful rhetoric, and for those that pay about this much attention to it, gosh, I don't want that to happen. I don't want my school to shut down. I don't want my teacher fired. I don't want that to happen. I don't want that to happen. And so the other side is left with these, well, you can't believe the destruction that will occur if a bill to roll back union power is passed in Columbus. As I mentioned, roughly 30 states have these bargaining laws. The other 20 states have a system that works without this and works well. So, get back there.
Yeah, a lot of the publicity, of course, is going to SB 5, but I'm pretty sure its companion bill, House Bill 102, is also going to committee on Tuesday, I believe. And I know that it also includes, unless it's been changed really recently, that the state does not take money, as you were talking, out of the paycheck for the unions and a few other things. And just from my personal observation, since, the Republicans do have control of the Senate and the House, I have found, looking at their votes, which I watch pretty carefully on other matters, it seems to me the House is a bit more conservative than the Senate here in Ohio, even though, like I said, Republicans have majorities. I think there's a few more rhinos in the Senate than there is in the House. So I'm just saying, the House bill, I believe, is still, last I saw, it was still going up, it was still going to go to committee, its second hearing on Tuesday as well.
Yeah, I will take your word on that. I didn't do the research on that particular bill, but I would guess they would probably twin track it. It seems to me that the Senate bill, they can get it through there. Maybe the thought is that it's a downhill fight into the House, perhaps, and that makes good sense strategically. Sir, right here.
Last night, I was watching O'Reilly back there, and he showed one clip of Obama talking about when he was going through his running for president, and said that he would join union workers, put on his softest pair of shoes, and march with them. And O'Reilly reads a note that was in the New York Times from a woman named Strassel,
Kim Strassel?
and said that Carter made an amendment to the rule of federal bargaining employees, what was that, back in 1979, 1980, somewhere 80. And disregarded, changed that rule that was in there. Nobody, O'Reilly didn't know about it, nobody knew anything about it until this woman wrote it in the New York Times, and they said that's probably why Obama didn't go to Wisconsin. And so, you know, I don't know if you knew anything about it, I certainly didn't.
Yeah, I'm not familiar with the article, but I think Obama, as he's now in re-election cycle, he's always been in re-election mode. Every politician is in re-election mode. Just remember that. What's the first thing a politician thinks about after getting elected? Exactly. Always remember that. Don't ever forget that. But Obama's now in election mode, and I think he's realizing, I think his handlers are realizing that this is a losing effort, what's going on in Wisconsin. I mean, the most militant people are up there cheering and screaming, but I think American taxpayers and American citizens are sitting back and saying, what in the world is going on? They don't know all the details, they don't know all the details, but to think that a political party, elected official, would leave the state and hide out in a hotel. I mean, for the most rabid people that are on the payroll for organized labor, that's a great thing. That's like Che Rivera, you know, that's like, wow, really good leftist stuff. That's Saul Alinsky stuff is what that is. But for ordinary taxpayers like you and me and my wife and my kids, they ask questions, Dad, why are those guys leaving the state? Don't they get elected to go there and debate? Yeah, they do, honey, they do, and they should. So I think Obama's looking at it and saying, this is not the political winner that I think that I'm going to need is I'm going to try to win Wisconsin. Wisconsin's a battleground state, so is Ohio. So he would tread very lightly here. And when it gets down to, you know, trusting John Kasich, and I don't know whether you do or you don't have to, but when he says we've got an $8 billion deficit, we've got to do something about it. And on the other side, you have people screaming and yelling about don't take away anything from us. I think the people of Ohio will look at that and say, I think I know what side I'm on. I believe that to be the case. And so Ohio and Wisconsin are huge battleground states for Barack Obama. So I think the fact that he's not been there and he's kind of backed off of his rhetoric, you know, the first thing he said on Wisconsin, this is an assault on unions. Well, he was absolutely right. It's not an assault on the workers. It's not an assault on the taxpayers. It was an assault on the union officials. That's what it was. And we need to get our semantics right on that. Thank you for bringing that point. You know, we're not against union members. We're not against workers. We're not against labor. We need to be careful how we use our words. There is a difference between labor and union workers. There's a difference between union workers and union officials. And ladies and gentlemen, the fracture in the union movement is growing every day. Private sector union members are looking around saying, why are my taxes going up? Why are my property taxes going up? Why is government growing so quickly? Why can't we get these things done? Why can't we change anything in the state capital, fill in a blank state? Their brothers and sisters in the public sector unions are causing this trouble, and there's a fracture there, and they understand that. And it's not going to end well for organized labor. Nothing ends well when you rely on compulsion to make a solution. Yeah, right here, ma'am.
I think what that said was that members of the public union couldn't pick it, government union couldn't pick it as a private.
Couldn't pick it, okay. Well, you know, one of the interesting things about if you go back to Reagan and you go to the air traffic control, federal law says you can't strike. Well, they went out on strike, and what did Ronald Reagan do? He enforced the law. You know, and there's provisions, there are going to be provisions in the Senate Bill 5, and probably the House bill, where there's going to be no strike provisions. It's actually legal to strike in public employment in Ohio right now. Firefighters and police officers can't. I think they're going to roll the prohibition against strikes in on teachers and others. The problem with that is, if you still have a bargaining structure, what do you use for impasse resolution? And the impasse resolution of choice is binding arbitration, which kills taxpayers. So I'm not sure what they're going to do. And of course, union officials just say, of course it's illegal to strike, but you go out on strike, and the first thing you ask for at the table is what? Amnesty from the penalties of going out on strike. It happens all the time. It happened in the transit strike in New York. There's a Taylor law up there that says for every day you go on strike in New York as a public employee, you get docked 2 days' wages. You think anybody paid 2 days' wages after the transit strike? Absolutely not. Because the union officials sat at the table and said, we are not coming back to work until you agree, first and foremost, that we don't pay penalties under the law. crazy stuff. Back there, and then I'll come over here.
Correct me if I'm getting this wrong, but what is the end game? If the unions get what they want, won't they collapse the states and then end up collapsing the country and then they get nothing?
Well, that's, as John Keynes would say, that's all, we'll all be dead by then. But, you know, that's not, you're absolutely right, and that's where we are.